I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Prime Minister is on a mission to bring home the victim of yesterday's terror attack on the Israeli embassy in Jordan. Israel has decided to keep the metal detectors in place on the Temple Mount, and we'll reveal which Israeli company has made one of the largest exits of all time. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. We open with a breaking terror attack. A Palestinian from the West Bank city of Kalkilia has just been arrested for stabbing an Israeli bus driver in central Israel. The attack occurred outside a shawarma stand in Petah Tikva, where the 32-year-old victim regularly eats lunch. The driver is in moderate to serious condition and is reportedly an Arab Israeli from the town of Agara who was mistaken for a Jew by the terrorist. The 21-year-old suspect says he did it all for Al-Aqsa Mosque. He was in prison between 2015 and 2016 for terrorist activity and is currently being interrogated by the Shin Bet intelligence service. Reports say that the suspect was neutralized by a restaurant worker with a pizza tray. An Israeli security guard has been stabbed in a terror attack at the Israeli embassy in Jordan, and the Israeli Prime Minister is now vowing to bring the victim home, even though he's currently being held for questioning by the Jordanian government. It also looks like the 17-year-old Jordanian behind the assault was motivated by the controversy on Jerusalem's Temple Mount.
Mohammed Jawadeh had reportedly been hired to carry out some carpentry work in the embassy building. But when he entered the building, he stabbed an Israeli guard with a screwdriver. The Jordanian's attack was reportedly spurred by his anger over Israel's decision to implement new security measures at the Temple Mount following a shooting attack that left 2 Israeli police officers dead. But Jawadeh's father says that it was a personal dispute and that his son isn't involved in politics.
ابني أول إشي لا يتجاوز عمره 16 سنة ولسه مراحل الطفولة لسه فيه. ابني له يعني تاع مشاكل ولا إرهابي ولا عنده أي انتماء لأي جهات فهمت علي معينة مثلا سياسية أو أي شيء. عرفت علي؟ موظف راح يؤدي عمله فهمت علي ومع الشوفير ويخلصوا شغلهم وروحوا فهمت علي يعني يوم ما دخلوا وقعدوا بحدود ساعة ونص ساعتين في البيت دخلوا ضمن تفتيش معين غير مسلحين.
The injured Israeli guard is a deputy director of security at the embassy, and he's being treated in a Jordanian hospital. But the story doesn't end there. He's now being held by Jordan for questioning in the ongoing investigation. The Israeli Foreign Ministry points out that he has diplomatic immunity and should be free to leave. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing to bring the guard home against Jordanian wishes. It seems like a diplomatic crisis between Israel and Jordan may be brewing. Some in Jordan are even calling for the guard's execution. Jordanian forces surrounded the embassy following the attack, using tear gas to disperse rioters who gathered. This is not the only place where Temple Mount tensions have led to violence either. On Thursday, members of a Turkish fascist group with ties to Turkish President Erdogan attacked a synagogue in Istanbul, throwing rocks at its windows and threatening to put the synagogue under siege. In response, Israel has closed all embassies and consulates in Turkey.
Joining me now with a more in-depth perspective on the Temple Mount security situation is Major General Amos Yadlin, the former chief of IDF intelligence and the current head of the Institute for National Security Studies. Thank you so much for coming in.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, let's begin with perhaps the biggest news of the day, the attack in the Israeli embassy in Jordan. Now, how is this going to affect the relations between Jordan and Israel, in your opinion?
Yeah, we should see it in a wider context. We have 3 circles of conflict. One on the Temple Mount, second in the West Bank and in Israel, where terror wave is already there from 2015. But what happened on the Temple Mount is relaunching it.
Right.
And there is now a third conflict in the Arab world against Israel. But we have to pay attention that in the Arab world, it's not Jordan and Egypt and the Saudis that pushing it forward. It's the other axis of the Muslim Brotherhood, led by Qatar, Turkey, Hamas, and the Islamic northern part within Israel. And they set the fire. And we all have to remember, it has started from killing 2 Israeli policemen on the Temple Mount.
Now, but with an attack like this in Jordan, even if you're saying that it's not obviously, these tensions aren't coming specifically from the Jordanian nation, are we still going to see, diplomatic ties between these 2 countries fall now? Is that something that could happen as a result of this?
We have an opportunity here to use this incident maybe to try and de-escalate the Jerusalem crisis.
Right.
Because if Israel will be using this incident, like let the Jordanian police interrogate the guard, because 2 people were killed in the Israeli embassy, and then evacuate them to Israel, and in the same time give the Jordanians a diplomatic achievement by let them lead some compromise
But we're
on
already
the Temple House.
we're already seeing Bibi essentially vowing to bring this injured guard back home as soon as possible. So,
but this is very tactical. We have to look at it strategically.
Right.
And I think strategically, what we have to do is to do a conference with all the players, with all the positive players, the US, Jordan, Egypt, maybe the Saudis, and Israel, and even the PA. Leave Hamas, Qatar, and Turkey outside.
Speaking of Turkey, though, we are seeing Israel close its embassies and consulates following riots and an attack on a synagogue in Istanbul. What is this going to say for the future of this supposed reconciliation between Israel and Turkey?
Turkey is playing a very negative role in this Temple Mount crisis. They paying for those who incite, for those who demonstrate, and we will have to ignore Turkey in this crisis because they cannot play any positive position.
All right, so let's play devil's advocate a little bit here. Are the criticisms that we're hearing being made by the international community valid? What happened on the Temple Mount essentially started from a terror attack where 2 Israeli policemen were killed, right?
Yes, and this is somehow disappear in the international community criticism of Israel. So we have to remember that the security on the Temple Mount is an Israeli responsibility. And Israel should do everything to keep the security. And this is for Muslims more than for anybody else. So the criticism, of course, is unjustified. On the other hand, you have to be very careful not to take forward any claim of an Israeli sovereignty to be in the front.
Right.
Because Israel's sovereignty concerned the Temple Mount 50 years ago was compromised a little bit by Moshe Dayan, who gave the Waqf, and then in the international agreement of peace with Jordan, the Jordanians got some role. So we have to be very careful. And this goes again to my proposal to go forward with an international good guys meeting how to de-escalate this crisis.
Interesting. So you are supporting the idea of bringing international parties into dealing with it. Now Trump actually sent Jason Greenblatt over here. So clearly the U.S. is trying to get involved. Do you think there's going to be anything that happens as a result of American involvement?
I think the best to lead the process is President Sisi from Egypt.
Interesting.
Because as an Arab, he will be more credible to the Arab public.
We are seeing mixed messages from Arab and Muslim leaders around the world. It's unclear. It's unclear what is on people's minds here, right? And you still seem to think that's the right thing to do.
No doubt about it. But unfortunately, as I say, they are, in a way, instead of leading, following the street and the public. And leadership is to look ahead and to show your people where to go. And this is true for them and for our leaders as well.
All right, well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see if everybody takes your advice. Thank you so much for joining us, Aluf Amos Yadlin. The victims of the Halamish terror attack were buried on Sunday in accordance with Jewish custom, but as more details emerge, it's appearing that their deaths were largely caused by negligent security.
Yosef Salomon and his 2 children were buried in a cemetery in Modi'in on Sunday, and thousands of Israelis showed up to mourn their deaths. The 3 Israelis were killed by a Palestinian terrorist in the settlement of Halamish in the West Bank over the Jewish Sabbath. But what's shocking is just how avoidable their deaths were. The residents of Halamish knew that there was a weak point in the town's security fence at the southeastern part of the perimeter. That's because it's up against a forest with low visibility. In November, 3 Palestinians had entered through that point in the fence and started a fire that destroyed 17 homes. In Friday's case, the fence motion sensors did go off, but the IDF accuses settlement security of being too slow to respond and possibly missing a bed by just a moment. Plus, the settlement failed to inform the IDF of any breaches to security, thinking the alarm was just tripped off by an animal, which has happened in the past. Victor Vaknin, the settlement security coordinator, says that he has spoken about the weak security point in the past to the defense minister, the head of IDF Central Command, and even the IDF chief of staff, and had requested increased security in the area, but none of them had taken his request. When Omar Al-Abed entered Halamish to kill civilians, he did so through that very point.
We're hearing reports that Israel was planning to take down the controversial metal detectors they'd placed around the entrances to the Temple Mount following a terror attack at the holy site earlier this month. But it seems like that is no longer the case. After a 6-hour security cabinet meeting this morning, the government still hasn't decided how to continue maintaining security at the Temple Mount while reducing tensions. It's been a heated time in the Middle East since the shooting attack on the Temple Mount on July 14th that killed 2 Israeli police officers. Palestinians and Muslims across the Middle East have furiously protested and rioted against the metal detectors that Israel set up at the entrances to the Temple Mount. And a brutal terror attack last Friday resulted in the death of 3 Israelis. Now, the Israeli government has a difficult task on their hands. What can they do that will maintain security on the Temple Mount without being seen as a concession that makes the state look weak? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is searching for the answer.
מאז תחילת האירועים קיימתי סדרה של מפגשים והערכות מצב עם כל גורמי הביטחון, כולל הגורמים בשטח. אנחנו מקבלים מהם תמונת מצב עדכנית וגם המלצות לפעולה, ואנחנו מחליטים בהתאם. אנחנו מנהלים את זה בקור רוח, בנחישות ובאחריות, וכך נמשיך לעשות כדי לשמור על הביטחון.
Right now, the Israeli police are installing new security measures around the Temple Mount entrances, including sophisticated security cameras. And while Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan says it's possible the metal detectors will be removed, he believes that the security measures before the Temple Mount shooting already weren't enough. Of course, the Muslim world is up in arms about the security measures, which they claim is a desecration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and part of Israel's attempts to increase control at the holy site. The Islamic Waqf has now forbidden Muslim worshippers from passing through the metal detectors, and that's not all. Jordanian authorities are making some pretty strange claims. Although Jews are banned from praying on the Temple Mount and are very rarely permitted to ascend it on Fridays, which is the Muslim holy day, a former Jordanian deputy prime minister is claiming that settlers get up to some pretty strange activities at the holiest site in Judaism.
People only remember the last incident, but they forgot that Israel has been consistently violating Arab rights in Al-Aqsa. I mean, every week those settlers create the holiness of the Al-Aqsa mosque by dancing or practicing inside it on Friday, which really entices and excites many Muslims.
Meanwhile, Palestinian worshippers have taken to praying in the streets rather than at the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque as a form of protesting Israel's new metal detectors at the site. In the West Bank city of Bethlehem, dozens prayed on the streets behind models that they had made of the security barriers and then later set them on fire. Israeli forces have responded by dispersing the protests, with Palestinians hurling stones at the troops. As the Temple Mount crisis escalates and threatens to throw the region in turmoil, U.S. President Donald Trump has sent his special envoy Jason Greenblatt to the region to try to broker a resolution.
The U.S. has played a pretty hands-off role in the crisis, which kicked off when 3 Israeli Arabs shot dead 2 Israeli police officers who were guarding the Temple Mount. But now Jason Greenblatt is on his way to support efforts to reduce tensions in the region, according to senior administration officials. He'll be coordinating his efforts with Jared Kushner, U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman, and the U.S. State Department. The Trump administration's plans for a huge deal between Israel and the Palestinians are seemingly on the rocks, now that Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has frozen security cooperation and all contact with Israel. Along with that, vast differences between President Trump and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson on Middle Eastern issues like Israel and Iran are sparking rumors of a Tillerson-Rexit, possibly before the end of the year.
The tensions over the Temple Mount have even drawn words from Pope Francis, who's calling for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on that story. Now, Aaron, what does a pope have to say?
Well, he's practically begging, if not, just asking for peace and calm in the region. The Vatican has almost always consistently been pro-Palestinian, if not anti-Israel, for some years. So seeing these riots, seeing so many people get hurt, there's no way that the Vatican would have ignored this issue, especially being that it's in Jerusalem, which is a holy city also to the Christian faith. That being said, he's not only speaking positively for the Palestinians. His words are pretty well-rounded in saying, I want peace in general. I want people...
Well, and we have seen a changing perspective from the Catholic Church regarding Israel and the Jewish people.
Absolutely, but I think, we'll go to my report and let him speak for himself.
Fratelli e sorelle, seguo con trepidazione le gravi tensioni e le violenze di questi giorni a Gerusalemme. Sento il bisogno di esprimere un accorato appello alla moderazione e al dialogo. Vi invito ad unirvi a me nella preghiera affinché il Signore ispiri a tutti propositi di riconciliazione e di pace.
Last October, Pope Francis gave a speech at the Vatican where he claimed God had promised the Holy Land to the people of Israel. His remarks came in response to UNESCO's decision to approve a resolution ignoring Jewish ties to the Temple Mount. Officials in Jerusalem and the Vatican have been discussing the possibility of the Pope visiting Israel this coming autumn, but nothing has been confirmed. The last time the Pope visited Israel was in 2014, during the 20th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the Jewish state and the Holy See. Historically, the Catholic Church has been theologically opposed to Zionism or any expression of Jewish independence, though, especially prior to the Second Vatican Council. But in recent years, and with Pope Francis at the helm, relations between these two faiths have finally greatly improved.
The president of Turkey has gotten involved in the Temple Mount controversy as well, and of course, Recep Erdogan is no stranger to incitement against Israel. ILTV's Aaron Porras is still here with us now. Aaron, what is Erdogan doing?
He's very heavily criticizing the Israeli government. He's alleging, Israeli abuses at the Temple Mount of human rights, of religious freedom, all sorts of things. But what's surprising is that some of his comments can even come off as threatening.
Now, what is he threatening to do?
Well, like you said, he's no stranger to incitement against Israel, and he's just recently, in his own words, his own comments, he's said that he's reaffirming his support for the Palestinians and their cause against the Israeli, occupying state. So we can see that being played out anywhere from failed trade deals to votes at the UN against Israel and Israeli interests, and other international forums. We could, we could even see this coming up in the form of more freedom flotillas, like the Mavi Marmara in 2010.
All right, well, let's check out your report.
Erdogan is accusing Israel of assaulting people's lives and impeding their freedom of religion, even though it's the Islamic Waqf which has banned Muslim worshippers from the Temple Mount.
Kim olursa olsun insanların can, mal ve ibadet haklarına yönelik saldırıları tasvip etmediğimizi ifade ettik. İslam İşbirliği Teşkilatı Zirve Dönem Başkanı olarak ben buradan bir kez daha mevcut İsrail yönetimini yerleşik teamüllere, hukuka ve temel insani değerlere uygun davranmaya davet ediyorum.
On Thursday, an Erdogan-linked fascist group attacked an Istanbul synagogue, drawing international condemnation and forcing the synagogue to close for Shabbat services on Friday night and Saturday morning. Saleh is a controversial Islamist leader who has been imprisoned for incitement and violence against Israel. Israel has responded by closing the embassies and consulates in Turkey. It's anyone's guess as to if or when they'll be reopened.
Retailers worldwide have been moving their services to the net for a long time now, and they're offering everything from normal store selections to web-exclusive content. The one thing a customer still just can't really get, though, is a decent and accurate sizing. This is especially true for shoes, whose sizes tend to change, not just from brand to brand, but from model to model. So joining me now to tell us how his company has solved this issue is Noam Malali, the CEO of Wise Size. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so what exactly does Wise Size do? It sounds like a very useful platform.
Okay, so basically, first we solve a very big issue in the e-commerce industry because you have like almost 25% returns of online stores.
Right, people buy things that just don't fit them and they send it right back.
Yeah, especially for shoes. Because you have a lot of difference between models and between brands, and people really don't know what to buy. A lot of people are afraid to buy the right
So how do you
size.
solve this issue?
Okay, so what we took like approach of using deep learning and machine learning in order to learn the users and give you the best size per model that you want to buy. So you can scan your foot with our mobile app.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then we can recommend you for each and every model that out there. Like, doesn't matter if you go to Amazon or Zappos or.
So interesting. So are all of these different shoes on one platform, or it's just basically any website that you go to?
Yeah. Okay. So now we just launched about a month ago our technology into this e-commerce platform called ShoeTube.
Interesting.
Which enables Israelis to buy shoes from the US to Israel and get the size recommendation. And this is like the first time that people can use our technology, and then we are planning to expand to the US.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, this seems like a really useful platform, and I think I would love to use it myself because I have this issue too, especially with finding the right shoes. Thank you so much for coming in and creating something like this. All right, now get this. The largest sale of an Israeli pharmaceutical company ever has just taken place, and it also happens to be one of the largest acquisitions of an Israeli company of all time. Israel's Neuroderm has just been sold for over $1 billion to the Japanese Mitsubishi Group.
It's a big success for the company, which was valued at $164 million on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange in 2014. Neuroderm develops high-tech drug device combinations to treat central nervous system disorders like Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis. The CEO, Oded Lieberman, says that the sale won't just benefit the company's shareholders, it'll also benefit Parkinson's disease patients who urgently need new therapies. He says the Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma Corporation has demonstrated development and commercial expertise in the field of neurology, and the combined efforts of the now shared companies could bring new drugs and therapies to market sooner. Along with that, he says that Neuroderm shareholders are going to see a significant return on their investment, reflecting the value that the company has created with its pipeline and technologies.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. They say the greatest wealth is health, so today's word is bari, which means healthy in Hebrew. It's summer, which means most of us are hopefully trying to stay the most bari possible. After all, everybody wants to feel good in their bathing suits. But being bari goes beyond just eating well and exercising. It also means taking care of your psychological health. You have to love yourself to live a bari lifestyle, and remember that your only limit is you. So we wish you a bari summer this year around. All right, speaking of staying healthy, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast so we can make sure you're on track. Tonight should be partly cloudy with a low of 78 or 26 degrees Celsius. Temperatures are supposed to rise tomorrow to an unseasonably high 89 or 32 degrees Celsius. There's also a heat stress warning in place, so make sure to keep water nearby. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.59 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.